Imu does not have a single soul. Instead, he possesses exactly 16 forms of energy that he uses for himself as well as for the Gorosei and the Holy Knights. We've already seen different personalities of Imu across different arcs. The first hint came at God Valley when Imu called Rox Davy. At first, I took it as a random mistake or assumed he was referring to Rox as a descendant of Davy Jones, but it wasn't random. It never is when you're talking about Oda's writing. Other clues appear in Elbaf. The Imu we currently see in Elbaf is 100% a different person from the Imu who was there just a few chapters ago. Isn't it strange that he was so shocked to see Nidhogg when he was literally fighting him 5 minutes earlier? In Gunko's form, Imu had no reaction to Loki's devil fruit. Then, this new form of Imu arrived. He asked who killed Herald and who the king of Elbaf was. Most likely Imu can't see through his servant's eyes, so he couldn't know that Loki killed Herald, and that part makes sense. But here's where it gets interesting. Imu, in Gunko's body, stated that Elbaf had no king and decided to make Dory and Bragi the new rulers by eliminating Jarul. But when Imu arrived in Elbaf in a new form, he was actively searching for the king. On top of that, Imu acts like he has no idea who Loki is. But isn't he the one who chooses his holy knights? Even if the Gorosei select the candidates, I'm sure the final decision is Imu's. Did Gunko and Shamrock just randomly go to Elbaf and ask Loki to join them while nearly killing him in the process? That doesn't make sense. This isn't a memory problem. It's proof that Imu is not a single person, and every form we've seen is a completely different personality. The current Imu we see in Elbaf is badass, serious, and powerful. He feels and sounds completely different. Usually, corrupt characters delude themselves into thinking they're not the problem and that everyone else is. And while Imu does believe he stands above everyone else, he's also surprisingly self-aware and accepts the fact that he is evil. Admitting that he's evil and that his power comes from corruption shows a shocking level of self-awareness. That's a stark contrast to the other celestial dragons we've seen so far. We even saw him smiling. But the shadow form of Imu we saw in the Flower Capital is completely different. Even though he is the king of the world, he often came across as pathetic, sad, and nostalgic. Most of the scenes we got were of him staring at pictures of Vivi and Lily or at Joy Boy's straw hat. That's why there were so many Ryan Gosling memes about him. He was intentionally triggered by almost everything and his pain tolerance seemed questionable. Harold's death may have weakened him, that's understandable, but Joy Boy's hockey, and let me remind you, it was just a knot of hockey, made him look weak. Meanwhile, this new form of Imu was literally coughing blood, yet still managed to one-shot Zoro and Sanji and even fight Loki while enjoying it. And this is just the tip of the iceberg, and I'm confident I know the reason why these two forms are so different from each other. As I mentioned in my previous video, the number 16 is somehow connected to Imu. We can even see it in Imu's design. There are 16 eyes attached to both the front and back of his flame. In katakana, the two syllables in Imu's name can also be read as 1 and 6. In Don Quixote Don Flamingo's backstory, a man from the lynch mob mentions that his sons were shot 16 times simply for crossing the path of the world nobles. Later, Doflamingo uses 16 holy bullets as his final attack against Luffy. Then there's the Mother Flame weapon, which Imu ordered to be dropped on Leloucha. It consisted of 16 rays of light that completely annihilated the kingdom. Even Silver's Rayleigh, who knows the true history, told Luffy to ring the bell 16 times. In Taro, the number 16 corresponds to the tower. We see that the tower is struck by lightning, and I believe that in the end, that's how Imu will fall. You can find more about this in my previous video about Imu. Now let's continue with the theory. It's clear that there is some kind of deeper connection between the number 16 and Imu. Oda did not choose this number randomly. I believe Imu has a total of 16 souls, or forms of energy, 3 of which he uses for himself, while the remaining 13 are distributed among the Gorosei and the Holy Knights. First, let me explain the inspiration and connections behind it. In Hindu philosophy, which heavily influences One Piece, there are 16 kalas, aka powers. They represent the completeness of being: mind, emotion, speech, desire, and so on. Someone who possesses all 16 is considered a complete or divine being. As we know, Imu seeks to complete his world and often views the current world as incomplete. Maybe that's why he needs Vivi. She could be the missing piece of his grand plan. This idea is very similar to Pain's 6 paths from Naruto. Pain's concept comes from the 6 paths in Buddhism. This connects directly to the concept of samsara, the endless cycle of suffering and rebirth. So similar to Pain's 6 bodies representing suffering, Imu might have 16 bodies or souls representing full human complexity. Of course, I'm not saying that he literally has 16 different physical forms. We'll come back to Imu's forms in a few moments. The second connection to the number 16 is moon symbolism, which is also heavily tied to Imu. In Vedic tradition, the moon is divided into 16 phases. 0 represents emptiness, nothingness, while 16 represents the full moon or completion. Once again, we're talking about completing a cycle, completing the world. My idea is that Imu in the Flower Castle exists in his empty form. It requires the least energy, which is why his design appears as just a silhouette. He is nothingness, or Mu. This is his weakest state, and that's why he comes across as sad, nostalgic, and even angry. Even without the number 16, there is a clear connection between Imu and the moon. If Luffy represents freedom, light, and the dawn, then Imu symbolizes darkness, control, and the night. What makes this theory even stronger is how the moon functions in relation to the sea. In the real world, the moon controls tides, and in One Piece, Imu is directly connected to rising sea levels and global destruction. In Skypiea, several gods were mentioned: sun, earth, rain, and forest. But what if there are others? Or at least a moon god? What if this god isn't worshipped because he is feared, or because Imu erased the truth about him from history just like the Void Century? In that case, the final battle could be the sun god versus the moon god. There are even more clues supporting this, but for now we need to move on to the third connection between Imu and the number 16. I already mentioned the tarot cards and Imu being associated with the 16th card, but did you know that there are also 16 court cards that represent different expressions of identity, power, emotion, logic, and more? There have been many parallels between tarot cards and One Piece characters throughout the story. Just look at Basil Hawkins as an example. Even if you're not familiar with tarot, you've probably heard of the 16 personality types, also known as the MBTI system, developed by the famous Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung. 16 personalities, 16 variations of human behavior, each with its own traits. And this is what I believe Oda is using as inspiration for Imu's hierarchy system. Because one of Eiichiro Oda's most consistent storytelling habits is building every major organization around a clear symbolic theme, and then pushing that theme into everything: names, designs, powers, hierarchy, and even the way characters think. It started with Baroque works. Oda built on a number-based system, Mr. 0, Mr. 1, Mr. 2, where identities are replaced by codes. Let's take the Beast Pirates as another example. This crew is built around playing cards: king, queen, jack, and the numbers. Doflamingo's crew follows a similar idea, but in a different way: the Joker, hearts, diamonds, clubs, and spades. Big Mom's crew is based on foods and sweets. Even Germa 66 follows a pattern of colors. And of course, my favorite example, the Marines and the Admirals. The Admirals are labeled by both an animal and a color: red dog Akainu, blue pheasant Aokiji, yellow monkey Kizaru, and so on. This theme is so interesting that there are many theories about who the final admiral would be, since the admirals are based on the Chinese zodiac and there are still some vacant spots. Anyway, let's get back to Imu, the number 16, and his contracts. The 5 elders stated that only 13 people can possess the depths and abyssal covenants at one time. Since the elders themselves also have covenant-related abilities, this suggests that there are only 8 full-fledged holy knights at any given moment. This number is always maintained, and that's another recurring pattern in One Piece. Whenever a Yonko is overthrown, a new Yonko is announced. The same applies to the admirals, the Shichibukai, and even the Gorosei themselves. When Imu punished Saturn at Egghead, Figurlin Garling became a member of the Gorosei within minutes. When Garling became a Gorosei, a position among the Holy Knights was left empty. Shortly after that, Shamrock and Gunko went to Elbaf to recruit Loki. There must always be a balance between the Gorosei and the Holy Knights. The fact that only 13 servants can exist under Imu suggests that his power is limited. He can't simply turn everyone into his slave. He only has 13 souls to spare because he is using 3 for himself. Yes, 3. And that's what completes the number 16. Why do I think that Imu has 3 bodies or personalities? Because we've already seen 2 of them, one in Elbaf and one in Marijua. The Marijua version of Imu can also transform into a larger demonic form, but I don't believe that's a separate body. It's just an extension of the power from his silhouette form. I believe we saw his 3rd body in a recent chapter, during the moment he was speaking with Joy Boy. I understand why Oda chose to silhouette Joy Boy, but why Imu? For example, in Egghead we saw Emeth and Joy Boy. Joy Boy was silhouetted, of course, but Emeth wasn't because we already knew what he looked like. But even now, after showing us 2 different forms of Imu, Oda still chooses to draw him as a silhouette. The reason could be that Imu had a completely different form during the Void Century, and that's his 3rd form. One of Oda's hints could come from chapter 585. In that chapter, we see Luffy, Sabo, and Ace trying to disguise themselves under a single large cloak. They pretend to be one tall adult, and their combined form looks very similar to Imu. 3 people in one body. This all connects back to the moon phases. Even though there are 16 moon phases in total, the full cycle, the most important ones are just 3. The new moon, the half moon, and the full moon. The other 13 moon phases, essentially 13 souls, could belong to Imu's servants, the Gorosei and the Holy Knights. In conclusion, there are 3 forms of Imu and 13 contracts. That's 16 souls. That would explain why Imu becomes weaker whenever something happens to his servants. We clearly saw this when Loki killed Harold. Imu weakened and stated that these contracts come with a price. That's probably why he personally went to Elbaf and God Valley to assist the Holy Knights. It's not that he cares about them individually, he just doesn't want to lose more sources of power. His energy is clearly limited. One thing is clear, Imu can shapeshift with ease. Beyond his 2 main forms, we've already seen Silhouette Imu transform into a monster. We've also seen a gigantic creature on the mural that is clearly Imu. On top of that, we've seen him use the bodies of both the Gorosei and the Holy Knights, Saturn and Gonko. This again confirms that a part of Imu's power, 1/16 of his soul or energy, governs those bodies. As I mentioned earlier, I believe that Imu at Marijua represents the new moon, nothingness, pure darkness, just a silhouette. He conserves energy in that state. The Imu we currently see in Elbaf is either the half moon or the full moon form, and we still haven't seen his third form. Logically, Oda would save the strongest form, the full moon, for the final war, but I actually think all 3 of his forms are powerful. Each one likely has its own advantages and disadvantages, meaning even his empty form could have abilities that are more useful in certain situations than the others. Silhouette Imu fought using arrows and abyssal circles, while the Imu in Elbaf fights with Omen, the black flame, and his weapon. I'm really curious what abilities his third form will have, but that raises an important question. Why did Oda give Imu 3 separate forms? I believe that at full power, Imu will be able to use all 3 forms at the same time, and he will face 3 opponents: Luffy, Blackbeard, and Dragon. Think about it, who should be Imu's final opponent? Luffy? Why not Blackbeard, Dragon, or even Loki? All of them have their own reasons. Loki wants revenge for his father, Dragon has devoted his entire life to overthrowing the world government, and Blackbeard might have the strongest personal motivation of all. Imu destroyed his past and stands directly in the way of his ambition. Teach is tied to the legacy of Davy Jones, who was clearly an enemy of Imu. Rox even asked Imu who he feared more, Joy Boy or Davy Jones, and unlike Luffy, who wants to become king of the pirates, Blackbeard wants to become the king of the world, which means he must overthrow Imu. On the other hand, Luffy doesn't even know who Imu is yet and currently has no direct reason to fight him. At least for now, because that will change. Imu might enslave Loki or kidnap Vivi. After all, he already destroyed the Straw Hats in Elbaf. From a story perspective, Teach and Dragon actually have stronger reasons to confront Imu. That's why I believe the final battle won't be a simple one-on-one. Instead, Imu will face all 3. Luffy, aka Joy Boy, Blackbeard, aka Davy Jones, and Dragon, the world's worst criminal. Otherwise, it doesn't fully make sense. Most people expect the story to follow the mural, that Luffy and his alliance will defeat Imu and save the world. And sure, Dragon might be part of that alliance. But what about Teach? Blackbeard is just as free and chaotic as Luffy, but he follows a completely different ideology. Luffy wants to be king of the pirates, while Blackbeard wants absolute rule. If he doesn't fight Imu, then what was the point of his journey? To fight Luffy after Imu is already defeated? That's absurd. Even if Blackbeard can be cowardly at times, he would never sit back and let someone else defeat Imu. Imu is directly tied to his past, and he's devoted his entire life to defeating this one individual. That's why he waited for 26 years aboard Whitebeard's ship to obtain the Yami Yami no Mi, a devil fruit that most likely serves as a direct counter to Imu's powers. I also want to mention the possibility that in the beginning, Imu had more covenants. But each time a Holy Knight dies, he loses one of those souls permanently. That might explain why some of the eyes on Imu's flames are missing. Those eyes could represent the souls of the first 19 kings from the Void Century. One eye may have been lost with Harold's death. Another could have been lost with Saturn's death. And a third might have disappeared because of the man marked by flames. If you want to learn more about this topic, you can click this video right here. Thanks for watching. Bye.